That's quite a fucking title. Life sucks. So what? Now, the reason why I say that is many people are struggling out there, both mentally, emotionally, physically in some ways, or just spiritually, sentimentally, whatever sort of word that happens to describe in any sort of perspective of how you struggle and how you happen to say life sucks. The reason why I titled the video like this is because many people do happen to think, what's even the point of living? What's the point of even accomplishing something? What's the point of even pursuing something? Having goals, thinking about the future, thinking about things that make you just want to say, fuck this, I'm going to make my life better. Why do I say that? I guess the reason why I say that is most because, well, this is coming from a place of my own personal perspective. Someone who has more of a realist slash lean towards sort of like an optimistic sort of style, but I guess the reason why I want to say this is I see many people within, my generation, or at the very least, the two generations that have to be stuck between. I was born in 1998, which means I am technically a older Gen Zer, an older Zoomer. And by the technicality, some people do have to put me into the categorization of someone who was born into a world where the whole aspect of like the internet, technology, touch screens, computers, like the concept of not having that is completely foreign to me or anybody who is around my age. I mean, hey, I'm 26, gonna be turning 27 in a couple months. That is a really strange feeling. I lived on this earth for 27 years. 27 years so far. It really is strange like that. But I guess I point this out because when I say I'm stuck in the middle, I say this because I feel like I don't relate entirely to Gen Z, but I also don't relate entirely to millennials. Like, I can relate to both of them on a certain level. Like, I relate to Gen Z in the sense of like having this sort of like meta-ironic, sort of like view on memes and everything like that, but it's not to the point when it's so grappling that you suddenly become chronically online and have this very like doomer aspect just baked into you growing up. And I relate to millennials in the sense that, well, a lot of them have this sort of like postmodernist. I'm going to be using a whole lot of terms that I suddenly learned on the internet. Postmodernist sort of like relatable, sort of like absurd, oh lol, so random, that sort of shit. I relate to them in the sense that, well, a whole lot of them just struggle with, a world that just suddenly feels like it's been taken away by them, by the fact that we happen to struggle both economically, financially, spiritually, esoterically, existential wise, emotionally, mentally, like I just said before, whatever word that happens to like fit into this whole aspect. And when I see so many people just giving up on life, and knowing the fact that many of our fucking ancestors have faced way worse shit. Now, I'm not denying our struggles. I'm not denying our certain particular traumas. I'm not denying anything that, all of us have been through. I don't like to do the whole, like, trauma Olympics. People just saying, like, oh, you went through this trauma. Well, what about that person who went through that trauma? I don't like doing that, all right? Trauma is trauma no matter how severe, no matter what type. Trauma is always going to be trauma. But there is merit to recognizing how other people who face worse happen to just persevere through. There is merit to that because, well, what are we going to be doing in order to like fix the problems that we happen to have in our society, and within our government? The economy is shits, and capitalism is pretty much just running on its legs, trying to pretend like it's all fine, it's all great, it's all good. And many of us want to keep this sort of like aesthetic, capitalistic, market, corporatistic sort of drama, this sort of like nostalgia in order to pretend like the American dream, economic stability, being able to like buy a house, being able to raise a family, being able to afford food, being able to pursue your dreams, become, I don't know, somewhat famous, which is pretty much stemming from like the self-esteem movement that many baby boomers happen to implore onto millennials, and also a certain aspect of like helicopter parents post 9/11, the Gen Xers trying to like raise Gen Z kids to make sure that they're quote unquote safe and everything, mostly due to the fact that many Gen Xers were latchkey kids and just, well, faced a whole lot of like self-reliance and the ability to just not rely on other people, but at the same time, they know that honestly though, it's a pretty horrible way to raise kids, so they try to raise their kids in a different way. I noticed that a whole lot of parents who go through a whole lot of bullshit with their parents, they try to be better than them. They try to do things differently. But the one thing I've always seemed to realize is that sometimes they don't seem to realize that some of their own mistakes can actually also fuck up their kid, despite the fact that they have the best intentions in order to raise their kid to suddenly feel like, oh, I'm gonna have a better life than my parents, blah blah blah. Which, yeah, it's intentionally good. There's good intentions behind that. But I don't know. It's just I look at many other people who are, I don't know, the youngest, like, I don't know, in their early 20s, and the oldest in, like, their mid 30s. I have friends of all kinds from all ages, from, like, early 20s to 40s, sort of like blending experiences of, like, the Zoomer generation, the Millennial generation, and so, like, try to listen to how both of them have experienced their childhoods, their 20s, their early adult life, their sense of independence. And believe me, there's sort of like a general experience with the average person, whether being Gen Z or millennials, but everyone's their own individual. Everyone's their own, like, person in order to figure out life, but you start to notice patterns. With millennials, a lot of them grew up with this whole, like, you can do whatever you want, the world is your oyster, the world's going to be great, so we have so much progress, but it was taken away from them post 9/11 and of course the 2008 recession, where the whole idea of just buying a house, raising a family, doing everything like that, something that your baby boomer parents expected you to do. And suddenly, the American dream was just taken away. Because many of the hedge fund people, many of the top 1% of people, fucked you over. They fucked all of us over. And frankly, I'm just, well, I guess I was just having the same experience as Gen Z of just being raised in the world where everything is just going to shit. Everything is fucked up. Everything is just going against you. But there was some semblance of hope. I mean, I remember growing up in like the latter half of like George Bush, Barack Obama, and then I grew up with like the first term of Trump, then Joe Biden, and now I'm growing up with the second term of Trump. Such a weird thing. It's like era of presidencies happen to represent sort of like how people experience as childhoods. And I always seem to ask people who, I don't know, who are like turning 22 and who pretty much had their first election when they turned 18. Like, how do you feel about growing up with this term or this presidency? Because it really is interesting how it happens to shape the form. Like, I grew up with YouTube. I remember discovering YouTube when I was like 8 or 9 years old, discovering YouTube poops, discovering the re-uploads of Walking with Dinosaurs, anime music videos or AMVs of Dragon Ball Z, and just so much just shit uploaded by people. And here it is, a video that I'm uploading to my channel 20 years later, 26, turning 27. Such a weird feeling. It's like I am older than YouTube, and I grew up with YouTube and the internet in general. I grew up with a more wild, more decentralized internet that has gradually just transformed into something more centralized and something that feels more controlled on the surface web, at least. We could talk about like the deep web, the dark web some of the time, but it makes you really just have a sense of deja vu when you realize that everything that you've experienced when you first got on the internet feels so different with how you actually experience the internet right now. Maybe the reason why I'm doing this sort of like one take, sort of like vlog sort of shit, because I have this nostalgia of being a lot more personal with having a YouTube account. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm gonna get back to the whole main topic. Life sucks. So what? Another reason why I happen to have this idea of just sort of like, suck it up. The world doesn't owe you shit. Mostly because, well, both my parents are Gen Xers. Later Gen Xers who basically have more relation to baby boomers. My mom was born in 1966, which is like the cusp and the beginning of Gen X. So was my dad in 1966. And many of them were Gen Xers by technicality, just like how I'm Gen Z by technicality. But a lot of them also had the baby boomer sort of mentality in some certain aspects. And I was raised in sort of like a self-reliant sort of thing where my mom would just be a lot more just sort of like talk about her childhood in the 1970s and 80s. Generally the more older Gen Xer sort of experiences. And, well, she would talk about her music. She would talk about bands like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, rest in peace Ozzy, and also the punk bands like the Sex Pistols and the Ramones. And that pretty much influenced my sort of like music tastes and beyond that. And she also influenced sort of like my philosophy on life. And generally it's sort of like, hey, life sucks sometimes. You gotta get over it. The world doesn't owe you shit. And I'm saying this not because, like, I don't know, I'm some conservative. In fact, I'm a leftist. I'm a libertarian syndicalist. But at the same time, when I see Gen Z and when I see them, a lot of them just giving up on life, giving up on sort of like making things better for everybody else and for themselves, I seem to notice that a whole lot of them are pretty antisocial. Not all of them, no, but some. In a more like social pattern sort of sense. And when I see that, it actually makes me pretty sad. I guess I just see this because in certain aspects of life I had to raise myself. And I'm open about this. I'm going to be open about something, and I'm going to give you a warning. I'm going to talk about abuse, violence, domestic violence, just radical, far-right extremism, just stuff like that. I grew up in a pretty abusive household. My dad was a misogynistic, abusive, sociopathic, diagnosed, not using that as like an insult, sovereign citizen, egotistical, full of himself, could not admit when he was wrong, could not put aside his ego in order to like help others for out of like genuine sincerity, but out of his own ego and presentation of his supposed meek, mild nature, which is just complete bullshit. And he would just not admit that he fucked up. I would see my mom be beaten. I was beaten. My little brother and sister was beaten. For context for my little brother and sister, both of them have like severe neurodevelopmental disorders. My little sister has Down syndrome and some form of level 3 autism. My little brother has level 2 autism. I myself, I'm neurodivergent. Autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, PTSD, and probably some other stuff. And the one thing I've always learned is, well, as much as I do want to, encourage people to just be a lot more communitarian, certain aspects of life do happen to, well, force you to be a lot more self-reliant, independent, individualistic. And yeah, sure, I do encourage everybody to be a lot more community-based and a lot more social and just work together with each other. At the same time, sometimes you're thrown to the wolves. I was thrown to the wolves. I had not the best hand in life. I literally had to take care of my mom after she was diagnosed with lupus, sciatica, scleroderma, all kinds of ailments, and I had to watch my mom slowly die in front of me. It's not something that you can just get out of there and be left unscathed, both mentally and emotionally. And I so suffer from the fact that I had to watch my mom slowly die in front of me. And the one thing that gives me comfort is the fact that I told my mom, I love you. And the fact that I took care of her and I saved her from being murdered. There was a time when I used to fist fight my dad in my teens. I would punch him in the face every single time he would try to punch my mom. I would defend my mom. I would risk my life. There were many times he would just... There was one time he pinned me to the ground. He pinned me to the ground after I cut off my rage-filled adrenaline rush, and he was dripping his blood on my face. That psychopathic bastard dripped his own blood onto my face saying, "Look what the fuck you did." And I was like, yeah, I fucking did that. Just to show him you are not gonna fuck with me. And you know what? I survived my fucking dad. I survived taking care of my mom and my little brother and sister. And guess what? You know this apartment? I'm moving out of here. I'm moving out of my hometown. I'm moving into a better town. I have a good job. I'm doing everything I can in order to better my life. I'm in therapy now in order to discuss my trauma, my own toxic qualities about myself, my toxic traits. Well, no, toxic habits. I should probably say that. Toxic habits. And frankly, I'm also discussing, just unpacking my own, well, upbringing. How my upbringing happened to shape, like, my friendships, my relationships, how I view sort of like relationship dynamics, and certain things about myself that I realized that I kept on until recently that really hindered, like, my need, no, not my need, my want to make connection with people. I have a way better social life. And before then, and this is back when I was taking care of my mom, and also back when it was COVID, I was chronically online. I was socially isolated. I was depressed. I felt alone. I felt just down on myself. You know, I try to wear a mask of just, oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm doing fine. Oh, it's not a big deal. Just for the sake of, like, my mom. My mom felt guilty about the fact that, well, I didn't really have that much of a social life while taking care of her. It's not her fault. It was due to the fact that she had back injuries from the abuse that she had to endure. It was from the fact that she had so many ailments due to the stress of being a punching bag for my dad. Not many people know this, but lupus is actually also caused by so much abuse trauma. That is a major factor. Also, another factor is my mom's side of the family has a whole lot of genetic autoimmune disorders. And once I realized this, I realized, oh my god, I could possibly be passed down, not just like any form of mental illness, but also possibly have an autoimmune disorder that I didn't even know about until it's possibly too late. There's a part of me that really wishes I saved my mom a lot sooner. There's sometimes I would look in the mirror and I would just be like, why were you so weak to stand up to your dad? I punched him. I told him off. But I felt like I could have done a whole lot better. There are certain times when I felt like, why do I feel worthless? Why do I feel helpless in order to save the person that I love? Why do I feel like I can't just be someone who people have described me as? A hero for my mom. Strong. A protector. Someone who can actually just be a lot more just strong, you know? I was the most emotionally functional out of my entire family. I had to be emotionally functional for my mom, for my little brother and sister, for my entire family. But it was nothing more than a mask. Externally, I pretended I was emotionally functional. But internally, God, I was just torturing myself. Just for the sake of, like, my mom's own stability or what she had. Trauma. Trauma can really fuck you up. And I think whatever is out there that I didn't turn out worse. Now, I'm not going to be like, oh, you know, I haven't done anything, you know, sort of like fucked up or something. I have my fuck ups. I have my faults. It's part of who I am. I'm human. But I thank myself, and I thank whatever is holding me from going completely insane, because I have every single reason to just go fucking insane, become a total fuck up. But I didn't. You know why? I wanted to make my life better. Despite everything, I never even got my license until the age of 23. Before then, I used to ride bike to work, especially in the wintertime with my fat tire bike, because I wanted to make something of myself. I wanted to better my life. I didn't want to be stuck in that situation for so long. Feeling isolated, feeling like nothing is going your way. I get that. I totally get that feeling. But guess what? The one thing that you can do in order to make your life better is to, well, put yourself out there. Have a certain strong level of emotional endurance. And when I say that, some people happen to conflate emotional endurance with emotional just repression, toxic sort of masculinity, or having this sort of like repressive sort of style of emotional closed off, putting a wall behind it, which is not the case. No. What I'm saying is that you need to learn how to process your emotions and learn emotional regulation skills and learn how to deal with life in general. It's not just systematic, although a large part it is. It's also part of the fact that the world and the universe is chaotic just for the sake of it. You gotta learn to flow with the chaos. I've always had a chaotic life. My life has never been stable until recently. And that's mostly because I created my own stability. And you know what? Once I created that stability, you know what my first thought was? I was like, wow, I actually have stability. But it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like I deserve this stability. It doesn't feel normal. Like chaos was my fucking normal. Chaos, instability, just so much bullshit I had to endure. That was my normal. So I was kind of like an adrenaline junkie. Just doing whatever. Just being all loud and shit. Just, I don't know, just doing whatever stupid shit in order to get that rush. I didn't like, having this peace. Like, it's something that I wanted. It's something that I worked for. It's something that I would have loved to have when I was a kid. But it didn't really settle in until recently that I finally have stability. That I'm finally making good things for myself. That I'm finally bettering my mental health. That I'm finally achieving the stability that I wanted for myself. And I guess I'm just saying to myself, I deserve stability. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to feel comfortable within myself. I deserve to just have everything that I deserved as a kid. Stability. Everything that I ever wanted, and I'm getting it now. So if you're struggling to find stability, if you're struggling to find anything that gives you a sense of worth, believe me, there are two things that you can do. Number one, find a community that can really give you a sense of support. Put yourself out there. Find a new hobby. Make a connection. Find someone who has the same interests as you. That's what I'm doing. I have an amazing social life. I have a pretty interesting love life. Like, I'm not really in like a relationship per se, but I'm putting myself out there and I'm bettering like my relationship skills. With a few failures on my part, my own fuck ups like I just said. But I'm doing it. It may be later in life, but at the same time, better now than ever. Better now than ever. I surely hope that, my video goes out to someone who's feeling like life is not worth living. Like, what's even the point of just bettering myself? Like, what's even the point of just bettering my situation? What's even the point of just getting everything that I ever wanted? You can. But sometimes you have to go through certain pains. Growing pains. You have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Which sounds weird, but it makes a whole lot of sense once you think about it. Life is not comfortable. Life will just throw you everything that'll just come at you. It will hit you in every single place that you don't want it to hit you, but that's a part of it. Emotional endurance is something that I always encourage people to balance out emotional openness. I do encourage people to be a lot more emotionally open. I do encourage a whole lot of emotional health, but with one side of emotional health being emotional openness, feeling yourself Another part of it, in order to balance it out, is emotional endurance. Not all people can actually just interpret that. But hey, once you achieve that healthy level of emotional endurance and just learn to get back on your feet once you've been just punched so many times, like the cliche phrase, life doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. Like, yeah, sure, is it a cliche thing to say? Yeah, it is. But it's true. You gotta learn how to roll with the punches. You gotta learn how to deal with so much pain that you're going to endure in life. It's not easy. It's hard. It's fucking hard. I know how that feels. What do you think? I never faced a challenge in my life? I faced all kinds of challenges in my life. I faced all kinds of obstacles, walls I had to break through. I'm still facing them. But you know what? If I can survive all the bullshit I had as a kid, and into now, and if I can actually finally accomplish the stability that I can get for myself, then I believe anyone can. It just depends on what you have to do for yourself. That's pretty much what I have to say.